Hello and welcome to another episode of Controller Club, the friendly face gaming space. A podcast where three friends from three continents share in one love, and that is video games. On today's show, we break down everything that happened in the emotional second episode of The Last of Us Season 2. My name is Tom Drew, and alongside me today is just one of my best friends in the whole wide gaming world. First, coming to us from across the pond from me, it's journalist extraordinaire, Australian abroad, Canadian training, Lauren Rouse. Lauren, how are you doing after quite the emotional episode we've just had here? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay, I suppose. I'm in like the grieving process. I'm still wearing the same clothes as yesterday. I didn't sleep very well, crying on and off. So it's great. It's so fine.
We're all having a time. It's Last of Us season, and we knew this would come for the people that have seen the episode. But it's still it's something we've all been bracing for. I watched it this morning, and
Mm.
then immediately went on like a 4 hour walk afterwards. Not because I like needed to emotionally, but also it kind of helped, I guess. So that worked out in a way. But I guess we should just get right into it. Lauren, I'll hand it over to you. Let's talk about The Last of Us season 2, episode 2.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, firstly, we didn't have you on the show with us last week, Tom. So I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on the premiere because we didn't get to hear from you last week. How did it feel watching episode one?
Yeah, I think because I listened back to what you guys had talked about because I edited the video version of the podcast, which you can watch on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, hi YouTube. Um, but yeah, I think I felt very similar to you guys. I liked the first episode, but I was kind of um still left kind of wanting a bit more. I think the big moments I really enjoyed, like the dance sequence. I think all of us were in agreement that that was like one of the standout moments of the episode. And that was the scene from the game that I was most looking forward to seeing adapted, and I think they did an amazing job. I think it did feel like kind of setting the groundworks, laying the groundworks, and kind of building to what we've gone in this episode and what we're going to get for the rest of the season. So yeah, I think I liked it, but it was not necessarily my favorite episode of the show so far. Um, but it was kind of necessary for people who aren't familiar with the games. I think like the fact that we've played the games, we know kind of what to expect and what some of these characters coming in. So it was needed. But yeah, I'm kind of glad we're on episode 2 now. And we've kind of gotten the ball rolling a bit.
We definitely have. All right, let's get into episode two. This was titled Through the Valley, and it was written by Craig Mazin and directed by Mark Mylod. Before I get into the exact events of what happened, let's just give our general spoiler free impressions. I think it's, like I said, safe to say we're in grieving mode after what happened. But overall, how did you feel about the episode as a whole without getting into the spoilery details?
Yeah, I think this episode was kind of what I was waiting for with the season. I think there's still for me like I kind of said, coming into it from someone who's played the game, there are certain expectations, and I kind of have to let some of that go in a way that I'm like, oh, they've changed some things. Oh, I wish some things were different. Overall, I would say I really like the episode. I like this episode more than the premiere. I reckon, um, particularly just because of how it fleshes out some of the newer characters in a way. In comparison to the game, where you don't really get that at this moment in the story, but also they do change some of the dynamics, and I'm not like upset. I don't even think they're bad necessarily. It just makes me curious to see how the rest of the season plays out, because some of the changes they do make do kind of have a knock-on effect of kind of like the pacing of some of the, I guess, reveals, and just how this is the story, and how your expectations of the story um they're just kind of affected in a way by the way they've told it in the vaguest way possible.
Mm, yeah.
But no, I liked it. I think there was some very standout moments, and some new stuff in it that I thought was works really well. So I liked it overall. What do you think?
Yeah, I think to your point, I also, for the first time in my entirety of probably watching this series, it was the first time that I felt like, oh, like I know what's going to happen, and I'm pretty sure it will follow a similar trajectory. But I also felt like we're a little bit in uncharted water, where we just like they've changed some things quite significantly that haven't impacted the overall story, but have changed certain relationships and, like I guess the momentum of the story. Where I was a bit like, anything can kind of happen now, and I feel nervous as a fan of the game because I don't
Yeah.
feel like we have the exact straight path that we did in the first season. But I'm also excited because I just am like excited for new content from this series and to see what they do. But it's just a strange situation to be in. Um, Looking at the episode from like an objective point of view, I really felt like this was like Last of Us's like Game of Thrones episode. It felt like it was like an episode 8 of Game of Thrones where it's like you've got the big battle, you've got the big like deaths, you've got the massive character moments. And it was only episode 2, so that was just
Yeah.
so wild. It was interesting, like the people I was watching, which they were sort of like, why wasn't this in the premiere? You know, like because essentially what happens in this episode is the inciting incident for the entire season. And that's why I think we all left the season 2 premiere feeling like that was nice, but like, what are we doing? Where are we going? Like, there's a rift between Ellie and Joel, but is that enough to carry the entire season? And now we obviously know it's not, but it did sort of feel like I wondered if HBO should have released these 2 episodes back to back,
Mm, yeah.
to sort of have that propelling arc, or have like an extra long premiere with this moment. I'm not sure. But it happened. They did it the way they did it, and I think it was an uncomfortable episode, and that is by design. My experience of watching it was just that I was dreading what was going to happen the entire time. So I found it really hard to actually enjoy the episode because I just knew that I was gonna go through by the end of it, and I was just sort of like anticipating that moment. So I feel like I do need to go back and like watch it again, but like it's just one of those moments that's never not going to be awful to watch. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if like them trying to distract me with this big battle sequence and all this action was like enough to like sort of level out the emotion that comes at the end. But let's talk about it. So I'm going to sort of split the events of what happened into like 2 halves. There is sort of what happens in Jackson, and then there's what happens like outside of Jackson, in this episode. And we'll start with the Jackson storyline. So we start things off with, I guess, picking up from the night before, where we see Jesse collecting Ellie for patrol, and she kind of reveals that she kissed Dina last night, which he didn't know, and they have a bit of a like joke about it. Jesse is Dina's ex, and he doesn't really seem to care that they might be together now or not. And they go for a walk through Jackson, and they see that the town is preparing for like an attack potentially because some people went out on patrol and they found a bunch of like frozen infected, which it seems like they were reanimating because there were so many of them out there that they were able to like survive the freeze by using each other as blankets or something, which I was like, ooh, that's
Yeah.
really gross. So the town is preparing for attack. And Jesse and Ellie are supposed to go on patrol. And Ellie says that she wants to go on patrol with Joel instead. She doesn't want to go with Jesse. And Jesse's confused because he's like, aren't you guys not speaking? And Ellie comes out and it's like, stop talking about us. We're fine. He's who he is. I'm who I am. That's never going to change. Leave us alone. So, what are your thoughts on this entire sort of setup sequence? We have some scenes that are directly from the game. We have this preparing Jackson for an attack, which we haven't seen in the game, and we have this scene with Ellie where she reveals that something has changed with Joel, but it's something that we haven't seen.
Yeah. I really like this kind of setup. It it just felt kind of nice because you do know what's going on, like going to happen. So at least we did. So it's kind of nice to have this like calm before the storm. I really did like that opening moment between um Ellie and Jesse, like them ribbing. Well, yeah, Jesse kind of ribbing Ellie for last night, and that whole. It just felt like they had like really good banter, and I was like, I wish we could just stay in this moment where nothing bad has happened.
Yeah.
A little bit longer. So I really appreciated that. Also, even like the um, the meeting with Tommy and kind of some of the members of Jackson, they're all kind of lighthearted about it and kind of like not taking it seriously in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like a drill.
yeah, exactly, and a lot of like personality came out in that scene, and I really just liked how that played out. Yeah, the line about Ellie kind of hoping that she would have been on patrol with Joel was interesting because
Mm,
I guess we didn't see all of that scene between Ellie and Joel from the dance after the dance the night prior.
mm.
So it seems like something, or Ellie's kind of ruminated on it a bit more, which makes the end of this episode a lot more tragic because it seems like she was hoping to kind of, at least to me, seemed like she wanted to reconcile with Joel, at least come to terms with kind of their rift. Um, so I like that addition to it. But yeah,
That's
what did you
interesting.
think?
So you think it made it more tragic? Because I actually felt I didn't need this at this point in time because I think it's
Right.
more tragic to think that she hadn't reconciled with him before what happens. And so I was sort of a bit like, why are we doing this? And it also felt a little bit like, oh yeah, something happened between them, but you're gonna have to wait to find out. It was like a bit of a like I don't know, kind of cheeky storytelling technique where it's like, I'm now gonna question this forever when you're not gonna show me. Whereas it would have come as a nice surprise later when you're like, oh, and now we understand what happened between them.
Mm.
So I actually felt it kind of cheapened the moment, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I wonder if like because at least the impression I got, I didn't think. I mean, well, maybe we'll find out more about like what has changed between them. My impression was that they might not have reconciled the night before necessarily, but that a conversation that they had, even like maybe Ellie stormed off and whatever, that it at least got her thinking that okay, maybe I can broach that kind of gap between them. I think the idea of her wanting to reconcile with him and then not being able to is the kind of tragic thing for me. But I understand what you mean. Like I think the crux of it is like I think the not being able to reconcile is the
Hmm.
the tragic part. But I wonder if that's the way they're going to go. If they do kind of reconcile it before that happens, then I would feel a bit differently about it, and we'll see if they actually do that on screen. But
Well,
we'll see.
yeah, I think the scene that happens at the end of the game between them is going to happen in the same spot because that scene is so crucial to the entire arc of Ellie. And I'm glad that we haven't seen it yet. But
Yeah,
it is just one of those things where it's like, and we'll talk about it again. Like we're getting a lot of knowledge up front that we didn't have during the
yeah.
game, and I reckon I recognize that's like a difference in medium, but it does feel like we're getting spoon fed a lot of stuff that I think might have had more dramatic effect if it wasn't. I'm not sure. I'm not in charge, but that's just how I'm seeing it. So from here, Ellie and Jesse go on patrol. They take shelter. There's a blizzard that comes in, and so they take shelter in an old 7-Eleven. That was actually Eugene comes up again. This was Eugene's old hideout, who was one of Jesse's old patrol partners. And it's a weed den. He was growing cannabis in there. And Ellie's quite excited about this. And they just sort of are holding up there while the storm goes through. We're going to pause again because this is a huge change.
Yeah.
We in the game, it's Ellie and Dina who go into this weed farm, and they have like a romantic moment, which kind of reaffirms their relationship. And Klein and I speculated on this last week, where we felt that it was going to happen, but we just didn't know how because the way they've structured this season is that they've kind of split the patrols into two versus what it was one in the game. And so I was kind of confused on how they would do it, and it turns out they're just not doing it at all. So how did you feel about it being Jesse this time around?
Yeah, it was an interesting change because then it's like the whole kind of scenario now is that Dina's with Joel and Tommy is back in Jackson,
Mm,
uh and then now Ellie and Jesse are together. So I think seeing it, I can see the screenwriters probably were like, okay, we want to do this episode. We need something else to happen in Jackson, but we can't just have that play out on its own. We need another character there. And then Tommy was that kind of that fill in. It makes sense for him to be back there. Um, but then yeah, that kind of changes the dynamics of what is happening because yeah, in the game, the scene between Ellie and Dina in the weed farm, is them kind of talking about the night prior, the kiss between them, and like them kind of come to terms with that, and like kind of reaffirming that they actually what they have between them is like more than just uh Dina leading Ellie on, which is kind of what you guys were talking about last week. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about this change necessarily. I don't mind it. I wonder if we'll get some of that kind of discussion between Ellie and Dina later on in the show. But it does, yeah, it changes the framework of it like a little bit.
It does because that moment happened before any of the big tragic stuff did. And so you knew that their relationship was kind of like Ellie was still who she was before that moment with
Yeah.
Dina. And now, if anything, like I hope they still have further scenes and they will just find another way to recreate this moment elsewhere. But it's like it's never going to be the same because the big events already happened. So it's interesting. I'm interested to see what happens. And I hope that they like obviously stick to Dina and Ellie's relationship, but I do wonder what it's going to look like now. It's going to look different, and I know that uh, sort of reading a few different things, Craig and Neil said that they wanted Dina to be with Joel for the scene because that reaffirms her connection to him and why she might go with Ellie a bit later on to sort of avenge him. And found that interesting because she didn't need that in the game. It was more that she was just so committed to Ellie versus her commitment to Joel, and I never questioned that. So I wonder if they were worried that people would in the show. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and it also changes obviously what like Tommy's feeling because he wasn't even there. I guess it's a similar feeling of like Tommy when Tommy and Joel are together in the game. He's basically like not able to save him, not able to do anything. And I guess that's similar with Tommy being completely removed from the situation. But again, like it changes the whole dynamic of how that kind of plays out. So, um, yeah, I think getting to the end of the season and seeing these changes and seeing how they kind of play out is going to be really interesting. Because I can't picture right now like the puzzle pieces that they're kind of laying out and how they all fit together. But um, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Okay, so back in Jackson, we see that the pipes that we saw the tendrils in from last episode, a worker has dug them up and activated them essentially, and this has drawn this horde of infected towards Jackson. And so we get this quite epic battle sequence. We see all the Jackson like people gathering on the wall. They're preparing with barrels of petrol and gas to like throw them into the snow and explode them and set all the infected on fire, which is a pretty good strategy. It's holding them off. Unfortunately, though, a big boy comes in, a big boy bloater. He comes in and he just smashes through the fence. And so Tommy prepares everyone to like get up on the rooftop, stay out of the street. And he gets down there, grabs a flamethrower, and they just like attempt to hold them off on the street. They release dogs into the fight. Shout out to dogs. And the other like members are trying to pick them up on the roof, but they're coming up the stairs. It's just full on. It's just chaos. And we have this great showdown between Tommy and this bloater where it looks like he's expended his entire tank of like flamethrower fuel and is out of gas, and he's done a good job. The bloater like did not like the fire, but it looks like it's the all is lost, and then it just collapses dead in front of him right in the nick of time. So it was an epic battle sequence. This was why I thought that it felt like Game of Thrones because it did feel like one of those big. At times, I was like, "This is just Jon Snow on the wall facing the White Walkers,"
Yeah.
but it was pretty cool. What did you think?
Yeah, it felt very like epic, like massive scale. It reminded me of like Helm's Deep, like just the like this is just insane, like so many zombies coming in. They're defending this of like defending Jackson. Um, this is completely original to the show, and I
Yeah,
didn't like know that I needed it, but I thought it was really cool. The thing that really like I got really excited about was like they have like the slides where they throw the barrels down. I was like, what are they gonna use that for? When you see them chuck the barrels down, I was like, that is very clever. So I just like how like the momentum I thought was really cool how they kind of did that, and then yeah, like you said, it kind of goes to the the blows are breaking through, and then the dogs come out, and um, yeah, it was just like really epic. And I love the little moments as well. Like you have the Tommy comes down from kind of the higher part down to pick up a flamethrower because I guess they need Tommy to do a couple different things in the scene, which I loved. But uh, it was interesting that like two of them just like left. They just ran off because they were like, "Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
doing this." So like those small moments of like vulnerability that like pierce through in this show. I think are just and just really cool. But yeah, what do you think?
I thought it was great. I was very invested. I was on the edge of my seat. I had some concerns about them having a wood fence and then also setting the infected on fire. I wondered why the
Yeah,
fence didn't go up,
yeah,
but that's just, I guess, me being stuck in the logic of it all. Dogs were pretty cool to see them in action
yeah,
because they're probably going to come back around. So I was good, like glad to see the good boys doing good work. I will admit though, I was struggling a little bit to get invested because I was just thinking about the other
yeah.
storylines so much that I was just like, this is great, but you're distracting me from what's going on over here. Um, so I think it was just interesting to have this episode be constructed in this way because it felt like this was maybe the first time that the show has felt more like a game than the game we're in a moment when the game felt more like a show. So I found that interesting that like yeah, we never got a big battle sequence like this in the game. And it felt very video gamey where they're sitting there like picking them off. You've got to fight the bloater with a flamethrower. Um and it was just interesting that that never happened. So I didn't dislike it, but I just thought that was just an interesting change to make.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think like it is interesting, or 2 points on that. Like the first episode had that scene with Ellie and Dina where they're sneaking up on the infected in that like abandoned place, and that felt very video gamey. And then this also, like you said, it does feel like they're kind of leaning into the gamey elements of it, which the first season had a bit of that, but everything still felt like quite grounded. But yeah, they're kind of leaning a bit more into that this season, which I find kind of interesting. But I
Mm.
do understand what you mean. Like I think it is interesting that I liked the battle scene and I thought it was really cool. But it's interesting that they felt like they needed to do this when there is also, like you said, kind of so much going on with Ellie and Joel and Abby that is kind of like your tension is kind of like, oh my god, there's like a lot to kind of keep up with. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from in terms of like not being as like invested in this story versus the other storyline.
Well, let's talk about the other storyline. So starting from I guess the beginning of the episode, we pick up with Abby, who we last saw in the previous episode, arriving at the town of Jackson in the mountains with her group, and they've taken refuge in a ski lodge. And they wake up in the morning. Actually, sorry, no. There's a scene right at the beginning, actually, where Abby is dreaming of the moment that in the hospital that night where we don't know who at this point, but we know that she is a firefly who is at the hospital and that she's warned, I guess, in her dream by another version of herself not to go into this surgery room because the person in there is dead. And the dream version of Abby says, no, it's fine. You're lying, and goes in there and sees what she sees. Uh, what did you think about this? Because we do go through this like accurate scene with the sirens ringing and it's a dark corridor and you're just looking at the one door with the light coming through and you have to go through and see what happens quite regularly in the game. And I found it interesting that they chose to have another version of Abby there talking to this Abby. What did you think of that?
Yeah, that was an interesting choice. It felt very like surrealist, and I guess like look, the show's about like freaking zombies, so it's like it's not hard to just suspend your like imagination.
Yeah,
But
yeah, but it's never
it,
really done anything like this.
no, it's completely changed the form in a way. And I wonder if this will come back in a way. I feel like
Hmm.
it doesn't feel like a choice that you would do just to do once. I wonder if there is going to be a bit more of like digging into Abby's psyche, where there is kind of this almost like angel and devil on her shoulder sort of thing, where there are kind of like other versions that you see in these kind of dreamlike sequences. Um, yeah, I think it was interesting to do this scene. Like you said, they do this scene multiple times during the game, and they've done it once here, and then because you get the revelation. of why we're doing this scene at the end of this episode. Um, so yeah, it is. I wonder if it's going to come back around. I think we're going to see a bit more of this in some fashion. Maybe not in the same way of revisiting the hospital every time, but
Mm.
maybe this kind of internal thing with Abby's character.
Yeah, it's interesting because they obviously didn't want to give away who had died in her life at this point so early in the episode because you get the reveal later on. But I didn't love this. I didn't love the talking to another version of herself. I thought it should just be, even if you don't see necessarily who she's grieving or who is dead, that it would have been more authentic just to see a raw reaction from her to understand the emotion. Because you don't actually see her go through the door and react. You kind of hear it vaguely, but it's more just like her version kind of being like, don't do it. You're not going to like what's in there. And I just didn't feel the emotion of the moment. So yeah, just one of those changes I didn't really like.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think, and we'll get to some of the other changes that they make. Not everything. It's interesting that like I think the first season is like it's very faithful, and there are like some changes here and there that they do. For the most part, I think they stick the landing on like pretty much all of them. This one it's not changing like too much, but like it's changing
Mm,
things enough where I think they feel significant in the way they have changed them.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's just I wonder if it's all going to pay off in at the end of this.
Yeah, it's hard to know without the full picture, isn't it? And that was the same way we felt in the game when you just don't know where you're going to turn next.
Yeah,
So it will be interesting once this is all said and done to go back to the beginning and see. Although we'll probably have to wait for season 3 to get the full picture.
yeah,
So,
that's the thing.
but anyway, back to the present day. Abby wakes up in the ski lodge where they've been camping overnight, and they look out to see in the daylight that Jackson is a much larger settlement and way more heavily guarded than they were anticipating. And so Abby, Owen, Mel, Nora, and Manny are the five, I think, who are there. Have I forgotten anyone? Yeah. And they're discussing what to do. How are they going to get in there? How are they going to find this guy called Joel? And Owen alludes to having a plan, which kind of settles Abby's like nerves. And she's like, great, you work on that. I'm going to go and keep watch. And she goes outside in the snow and does that. And when she's gone, the others are like, okay, so what's your plan to Owen? And he's like, my plan is to convince her to go home,
Yeah,
which is interesting because I do want to pause and talk about the group here because last week we were like,
yeah.
there was so little to go off with each of them. And this episode, we got a little bit more to dig into with each of those characters. Um, and it's interesting that quite a few of them weren't really on board with this whole plan with Abby because I think in the game it's clear that they were all ex Fireflies, which they are here too, and they wanted vengeance as much as she did. But here it's a little bit like, whoa, you girl, you're like, particularly Mel, the voice of sort of the moral compass of the group is just a bit like kind of quite opposed to what Abby is doing, and she has to really put her foot down. She's kind of like just the anger in Caitlin Deaver's performance really comes out throughout the episode. But what do you think about some of these peripheral characters in Abby's group now that we've seen a bit more of them?
Yeah, I liked that they fleshed them out a bit more. Again, I think it, and I think we'll talk about this more, but it does change things in the way that we are learning a bit more about these characters. But I think that was one of the aspects I did like. I liked the kind of hesitance that you do see in a lot of these characters in the game. Like you don't really get a sense of that at all. There's like a maybe a little bit of hesitance that you glean from Mel, but I did find it interesting that they kind of framed it of like they like the majority of them don't seem on board with this at all, and then they're thrust into the situation. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're having to do this now. So yeah, I liked this kind of um, hesitancy between them, and then we'll talk about it in a later scene. But like that hesitancy comes through like throughout, and it is kind of hammered home. Like they aren't all kind of down to do this, which is kind of goes back to kind of the theme of and the moral
Yeah.
message of this story.
Well,
But
it's
yeah,
been
I
5
like
years, right? A lot of them have probably made peace with the fact,
yeah
but for Abby,
yeah
she hasn't been able to, and that's the difference in character there.
yeah exactly. But yeah, I appreciate that we got a little bit more out of them because like you guys last episode, there wasn't a lot to go off of from episode one. But I was kind of unsure of like what like of whether I was gonna like gel with like these portrayals of them. But I do quite like how they've kind of been adapted on screen so far.
Yeah, I think we are seeing more of their personalities, but actually less about them. Because even at this point in the game, you kind of know that Abby and Owen have a history, and that Owen is with Mel, and that Mel is pregnant, and all this and that. And we don't have any of that at this point. And I wondered
Mm,
why, because we had that in the game with these people, but not in the show, which I'm sure. But then I was actually questioning, will that come back later? Maybe Abby and Owen are still together in this version. Maybe Mel
yeah.
isn't pregnant. Um, so I wonder if they are going to make changes like that, because I did question whether they would go with the mirroring thing where like Mel is pregnant and so is another
Mm,
character. But yeah, so far I think from what we've seen in this episode, I think Ariella Barrow's Mel is the most convincing of her character to me so far. Spencer Lord, he definitely sounds a lot like Owen, like in terms of just his afflection and the way he speaks, but he's still lacking the charm for me.
right.
So I think I want more of that from Owen. I'm sure that'll come in like when there's more scenes focused on him, but I'm still like lacking that at this point. And then Danny Ramirez's Manny is super interesting to me because it feels like they've combined Manny with Jordan, because in the game there are actually quite like a few more members of the group. Um, and Jordan is one of them, who's just kind of this like wildfire character who's very violent and just nearly kills Ellie, and you kind of like meet him and kill him quite early on in the game. And so I feel like they've merged those characters together, because Manny's kind of a little bit more soft spoken,
Yeah.
kind of friendly guy, and then this, I didn't see that in this version. It felt like he was more like Jordan, and I wonder if they were combining those characters for this version.
Yeah, I could see that. I wonder if they if once we see a little bit more of him like post this moment, whether they'll kind of show that kind of side of him. But yeah, it was interesting seeing like because everything I've seen of Danny Ramirez is like seems like a very nice guy like in all those other
Yeah.
roles. So it was interesting to see like in play such a kind of mean and horrible
Hmm.
bloke in this episode. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from.
So after this moment, Abby's keeping watch, and she sees a pair of horses in the valley, and she tries to get down to them, ends up slipping and falling all the way down this mountain, and lands in like a field of frozen infected, frozen clickers, frozen runners. And she's standing there trying not to make a move, and then they all just start moving, and there's like a sinkhole opens up, and this thing that they had alluded to earlier in the episode about the infected kind of using each other as like to survive the cold just comes to life. They all reanimate and start chasing her. Um, and so she's running away, she's leading them away. There's just so many of them following her. It's quite frightening to watch. And I guess appears at this, I don't know, factory building, industrial building. She kind of jumps a fence and tries to get by them. They all attack her on the fence. Another scene straight from the game where they're like basically crushing her under the weight of this fence. And one of them gets a handle on her. Looks like it's the end, and it gets shot in the head by Joel. Joel gets in there and saves Abby's life. And he takes her into the building. They're fleeing these infected. They reconnect with Dina, who's there on the horse, and they decide to just like flee. Abby says, "Hey, you can join my friends. We're at the lodge up the mountain. It's a lot closer than going back to Jackson. Let's get out of here." Uh, we should stop here because I just want to talk about that scene with the frozen infected. This was such an awesome scene. I remember like I was really like this surprised me as a fan of the game. Like the dread and tension I felt as they all just started waking up. I want to see that in the game.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how they've, we had in episode one, we had the Stalker, and now we have this with the kind of, I don't even know what you would call these versions of, of infected, but ice zombies, I
Frozen
guess.
ones, yeah, so
Yeah.
interesting.
I think it's really cool that they've kind of are finding new ways to show how the infected have kind of evolved and are like strategizing a lot more than they have previously. It makes me really excited to see if we're going to see a bit more of like if of like their different habits and what kind of different infected we might get throughout the rest of the season and in season three potentially. So I thought this is a really cool scene, and the way it kind of um like unfolds, and Abby's being chased after, and like that scene with the fence where it like just gets smaller and smaller. I thought was so well done.
The
So
hand
yeah,
going through the wire.
yeah. Oh my god, that was
Oh,
I cringed so much seeing that, but it was yeah, it
yeah.
was so effective how they did it.
Yeah, that was a moment where I was like, "Oh, they have, like, shoved a bit of gore in there." I guess this episode was always gonna be, like, probably the hardest rated episode, so they're like, "Let's put that elsewhere as well." Um, yeah, great scene, amazing tension, and this, like, just to like, connect things, when the guy in Jackson digs up the tendrils, this actually like, we see that tendril kind of idea in action again, where it's, like, all the infected that were chasing, Dina and Joel and Abby turn and go back towards Jackson, so that's how they kind of escape that, but, that was, like, a really cool redirect, I thought, using this tendril concept that we didn't really have in the games. So that was cool. So then we arrive at the lodge. Mel is quite immediately tending to Dina, who has some frostbite, and Joel's trying to immediately rally them all to go and help Jackson. We need the help. Get your guns loaded. Let's go. Because Abby had promised that they would help them if they went to the ski lodge, which of course was a lie because she knows that she's with Joel because Dina said Joel's name and she suddenly realizes that she has the man that she's looking for in her grasp. But she just needs to get him back to where she has the power, which she achieves by promising him this. And they, as soon as the group learns that they have Joel, Dean is held at gunpoint. They take Joel's weapons from him. He's like, yeah, hands up. And they interestingly put Dina to sleep in this moment. I guess they carried some anesthetic with them, and Mel and Jack sat into Dina. I was interested in this choice. Why do you think they put Dina to sleep?
Well, I think it goes back to like they talk about a lot how they're like, look, we're only gonna hurt Joel, right? Like they like think of like, oh, maybe we could like find some of those people on patrol, and interrogate them and ask them where Joel was. But they're very against like wanting to hurt anyone, like
Mm,
physically. So I guess that
mm.
goes back to the idea of like, okay, we'll put it to sleep. That will take her out. It's interesting because like it differs a lot from the game because
Yeah,
as soon as like they figure out who they are, Tommy gets decked. Joel gets
yeah.
blasted like he does in the show. So it's it's an interesting change of the motivations. That kind of is kind of what I was alluding to, because in the game, it feels like when they find out who Joel is, they're all kind of like it's kind of an oh shit moment of like, oh, we gotta like take this guy down. In the show, it's very much an oh shit moment of like, oh, we actually have to do this. Like, we have to do this thing we didn't really want to do, which I found
Yeah, we didn't
interesting.
think we would do. Mm.
Yeah, and I kind of like that because seeing the expressions on all of Abby's friends' faces kind of change and that sudden realization I thought was like was really well done. But it also again like it does change the motivations of like the rest of Abby's group versus between betrayals essentially.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of it from a narrative standpoint because I didn't see any reason why Dina shouldn't be awake for the scene. Like, they could very
Yeah.
easily just cuff her and tie her up, and she would just have to sit there quietly and not be able to do anything. I was just confused why they had to knock her out.
Yeah.
Because I wondered if this might come into play later, where it's because she didn't. So she's there long enough to learn the names and see the patch, so that she can now tell Ellie later in the series who they are, where to go. I can see that
Mm.
why they needed to do that because that's what Tommy did in the previous iteration to like give them a scent to go off. But she falls asleep. She's put to sleep before Abby makes the speech revealing who she is. And I wondered if it was because they didn't want Dina to know Abby's
Mm.
motivations.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. That's
And then I
probably
was,
true.
but then I sort of wondered why she wouldn't, she wasn't allowed to know.
Yeah.
Would it change her desire for revenge, perhaps? Would she try and stop Ellie from going because, hey, this is actually, you're about to do to this person what she did to you, sort of thing. And maybe that's like not as dramatic. I'm not sure. It just felt kind of
Yeah.
clumsy to be like, and we're putting you to sleep now instead of like, we're just going to take you into the other room or something like
Yeah,
that.
sure. Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, it probably is because they didn't want to add that layer of conflict of like of I guess Dina having a reason to maybe not want Ellie to go after Abby. Um, but yeah, like you
hmm.
said, like the way it kind of played out. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting how they chose to do that.
Yep. So straight after this, we get into the scene. Abby shoots Joel's leg out. He's now wounded, sitting on the floor, can't fight back. And she gives him this speech. Well, actually, firstly, she gets him to tourniquet the leg because she wants to drag this out. Like she said, she wants to kill him slowly. And so she gives him this speech being like, you do you know how many people you killed that night at the hospital? 18 soldiers, one doctor who happened to be my father. So we now know straight up who she is seeking revenge for, that her dad was in the hospital that night and Joel killed him. And that's why she has this burning desire for revenge against him. Um, at the same time that this speech is going on, we can see that Ellie and Jesse they haven't been able to contact Joel and Dina on the radio, so they're out looking for them. And Ellie has sort of is arriving at the ski lodge in the background, and this is when Abby has started beating Joel to death, basically. Um, and Ellie arrives at the ski lodge. She goes through the door. She's pinned down immediately, and essentially has to watch like begging. She begs for Joel's life. She begs for them not to, and she essentially has to watch as Abby kills Joel by stabbing him through the neck with a golf club. I want to point out that the golf club is broken, which means that Abby has been hitting Joel hard enough to break a steel golf club, which is insane. So it's very, very violent scene. And after this moment, the group, I think they debate on whether to kill Ellie. We don't really hear what's going on, but they say like, no, just leave. Let's get out of here. And yeah, Ellie is obviously very distraught. She crawls across the floor to sort of cradle Joel's dead body, and that's kind of the end of that. Uh, there is a short sequence after this set to the song "Through the Valley." We have a bit of a montage. We see, Abby's group leaving Jackson with their job done. We see Tommy and Maria reunited after the battle, but Jackson is definitely very worse for wear. And we see that Jesse, Dina, and Ellie are heading back to Jackson, and they're dragging like Joel's sort of sheeted corpse behind them on a horse. And that's how it ends.
Yep. It's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot
So
to
much to unpack.
get into with that. I want to start on Abby's speech about where
Yep.
she reveals that her dad was the person that Joel killed. I I think I don't think we've really said much like about Killing Eve this episode, but like she's amazing as Abby. I think she's like so good as the character. I think this speech was like the way she delivered it. I thought was really cool, and just very menacing. It makes you want to hate her.
Mm,
And I think they just did a really amazing job casting this character. I think she does an amazing
yeah.
job. I think I'm not sure about the reveal of her dad at this point. I'm
Hmm.
not sure how I feel about it. Just in terms of you find this information out like way later in the game in terms of like how the narrative's kind of set out. So revealing this motivation so early on for the audience, I, I'm a bit conflicted about it because in the game when Abby comes and kills Joel, you don't know anything about her. You don't know anything about the group really. So you are kind of like filled with this hate and like this blind kind of hate of like, okay, this is the villain, we got to get her. Having knowing her motivation, I think changes that a little bit, and it would be interesting to know how someone who hasn't played the game views that and how they view Abby as a character because it feels like off the bat they are setting out to make her a more sympathetic character, which I think is fine, but it changes the structure of the story quite a lot, and I know that's a criticism a lot of people have with the game, but I think I prefer the not knowing, and like I've just kind of talked about how like I do like the kind of hesitancy that you see with a lot of these of Abby's friends and that sort of thing. So seeing that I think is fine, but I wonder if this reveal maybe reveals a bit too much too early on. I don't know if you feel the same or if you feel differently about that.
I find it really difficult because I just can't, like, I was always going to know. I'm always going to
Yeah.
know everyone's motivations having played the game. So I just can't see it through any other lens. And I wonder, if people who don't know whether that like did justify it for them or whether they do still hate Abby with the same passion as us. Um, Yeah. Or if it does it lay it out too clearly what we're doing here. I'm not sure. I think it probably works for television
Yeah,
because no matter how they structure this season, it's never going to be the same feeling because you're just not playing as these characters. So I think understanding a little bit more about them is probably working a little bit in like the audience's favor for TV. I wondered though whether they should have had the scene with her dad, like that we see later in the game now. Like maybe that should have
yeah,
opened the episode so that we actually see, hey, this was a really nice guy and they had such a lovely relationship like Ellie and Joel did, and then you might feel more on her side. Um, because even for her to say, like, oh, you killed my dad, well, okay, but we don't know that guy from a loaf of bread at this point. So
yeah,
it still hits a lot harder for Joel to die than it does, even though say what you were like, Joel's the bad guy, right? At the end of the season, his choices have had consequences, and that's the entire point of this whole thing. But it was obviously always going to hit very hard because of the connection we built with him, whereas we have no connection to whoever Abby's dad is. So
yeah,
it was always going to be a tricky thing to do. But I'm with you where I was a bit surprised that they were spelling it out so early. And yeah, we really need somebody who hasn't played the games to say how they feel about that. So if you are someone out there and are listening or watching this, let us know what you thought.
yeah, definitely. Chime in. Yeah, I think seeing maybe that is the idea of like once we see a bit more of Abby's dad later on, maybe that will recontextualize things a bit more, and that's what they were kind of hoping for with like revealing this now and then saving that for later. Um, but yeah, I just do find it fascinating. Yeah,
It's interesting. I replayed The Last of Us Part 2 like as I've been watching the show, which I said last week, and so I replayed this scene this week. And it's interesting because no matter how many times I play this scene, I always have the same reaction. It's almost like a feeling of it's definitely a feeling of dread, and then it's sort of a feeling of like I'm going to be sick, and then it's also this feeling of obviously being very sad. And I, no matter how many times I've played it, I always cry. And so I was definitely feeling that same dread throughout the episode. Um, but I did have a slightly different reaction, which I think it didn't hit me as hard, which I think might just be perhaps because there were some things that were different. And I just found it interesting that I was having one reaction to the game and one reaction to the show. Still very sad, still cried. Um, and the moment that really got me in the show that they don't have in the game is like I think there's a moment where Ellie's like, "Get up, Joel, like just get up." And he kind of moves.
yeah,
The look in her face of like, "He's getting up, it's gonna be okay," just really
yeah,
broke my heart because I'm like, "He's not getting up from this." Um, and they even have that moment at the end, which is new, where she gets the like is able to crawl over to him and sort of hold his body. And I want to get your take on that because it was so sad to watch, but it was also kind of like, I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
apparently I was listening to the Last of Us podcast, and apparently Craig's take on it was that Ellie thought she was also going to die, because she'd been kicked so hard in the ribs that she wasn't sure that she would survive this, and so she just wanted to be with him and that they would like go out together, which I thought was interesting. I did never got the sense that she was that mortally
okay.
wounded. Um, but yeah, it was like the Mufasa and the Lion King scene, where he's just holding the dead body, and that really hit me.
Oh man, yeah, it that the scene was brutal. Yeah, that moment, like you said, where his head kind of raises, did like that change. I thought was like, oh, it was horrible to watch. Like it was just really sad.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that change with them, I didn't get that impression that like she maybe thought she was dying or not, but I I I did like it for this version of the show. Like I think it it almost kind of mirrored to me like the scene between Joel and Ellie in the first season in the first game where he's holding her and it's like it's gonna be okay, baby girl. But like it's flipped where like Ellie's holding him here, but like there's just nothing, and like he's gone, and it's just really sad. Um, I haven't played the game since it came out, but I did rewatch the scene from the game, um, and it is interesting. Like I kind of feel or kind of know what you're talking about, and like in terms of like I felt kind of differently watching the show versus like seeing how it played out in the game again, I feel like the game, and it's probably because of the nature of that it is a game, and you can get a bit more gruesome with it, but it did feel a little bit more brutal. And I wonder if that's the fact that like
Mm.
they also, I mean, there's a lot of blood, but also like the fact that there's a lot of Abby like hitting Joel, but you don't actually see it. It's like from behind, so you kind of like are forced to imagine like what's going on. So I think like that brutality of the scene kind of hit a little bit harder when seeing the
Mm.
games version again. So I kind of I don't, prefer is the like wrong word, but I
Yeah.
almost like I think that version of how they adapted it, I think works a little bit better maybe, but still like just just horrible. Like the way Abby's like laying into this guy and like clearly her friends are like not, they're like this just has to stop, like this has gone on for too long, and you don't get that as much like in the game, because they tell her to stop, but it still takes a little bit.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance because any sympathy that you've just built for Abby in like, oh, Joel killing her dad is kind of lost with the brutality
Yeah.
that she's showing. And The Last of Us is an incredibly violent game. Like we're going to see, I mean, even parts after this are insanely violent, and we're going to probably question some of the things that Ellie does and that Abby does later as well, and or that all the characters do. It's an insanely brutal world. And I think as like people who live in the world that we do, it's really hard to just visualize that. Like I think about people will say about the ending of The Last of Us season one, where, would you have done what Joel did to save, your daughter? Well, I can't imagine that. But I can imagine what I would do if it was my dad who was being killed in front of me. And I don't think I have that nature to go out and be like, well, I'm going to go get vengeance on that and go to these levels of things that these people do. So it's quite, I mean, that's like, it's television, right? Or the games, it's like putting you in a different world. And I think the game's really good at immersing you in that and making you
Hmm.
sit in how uncomfortable it is. And I was definitely uncomfortable watching the TV show. But I'm interested just to see, like, because I did feel differently, whether I feel differently throughout the rest of the show as well.
Yeah. Do you think it's also because you were kind of like dreading this moment through it for the rest, like for the, the whole of the episode, and then kind of like, do you think that like played a part in it at all? Like that kind of dread
Possibly, I
feeling?
guess I was waiting for the Band-Aid to be ripped off,
Yeah.
and now it has, so, yeah, it's just, when you think about replaying The Last or playing The Last of Us Part 2, it's never like, "Oh, that was a joyful time in my life." It's
Yeah.
so immersive that you honestly, like I question sometimes, like, "Why do I like this story? It's so violent and dark," and, like, technically not all the characters are really that likable, but I think it's just something about, like, being so, like, daring in the story that it's telling,
Yeah.
um so it's interesting. It raises all these very interesting questions. I thought it was interesting as well that we learned Abby's age, that she was
Yeah.
19 when her dad died. Now Ellie is 19 when Joel dies. And so really like set the foundation for like this is a cycle. This is what we're exploring this season. And it is putting a lot of that stuff up front, whereas like you kind of have to piece it together throughout the game through experience. So that's one of those things where I do think they have to kind of front load it in TV for the audience because you're not going to get the experience of doing it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And like also like I think with a lot of these changes is also baked into the fact that like with the game, you can play the rest of the game. We're not going to get all of the story at once, so you kind of have to bring some of these elements forward so that the audience has something to grasp on in a way. So I think that's something like I haven't really considered up to this point, but I think that's probably something they have thought about. Like season three is a long way away at this point. It's probably at least 2 years away. So
Mm,
they have to bring some of these elements forward.
for sure. I will add, just to sort of wrap this up, I didn't really think we needed that montage at the end. I think it would have been more powerful to just end
Yeah,
on Ellie holding Joel. Um, I didn't really. I think that that could have been saved. Love the song, but I think it could have
yeah,
been saved for maybe, yeah, just picking up with it next episode. Like it was more. I don't know. It just made me feel weird because usually in the game you sort of have a minute to just like sit with what happened. Whereas here it was like, okay, now we're seeing what happened sort of immediately. Not too much, but I just sort of felt like it elongated a scene that would have been dramatic to just finish with.
yeah. I do agree. I love the song, and I love like the fact that they incorporated it into the show somehow. But I did find it kind of like jarring almost that yeah, you don't get to sit in that moment like for a little bit longer, or at least until the credits roll and max, and then you have to click out or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, because in the game as well, isn't it that Ellie gets like knocked out, and then
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you that
Cut to
it
black.
kind yeah, and that leaves a moment of like you're just kind of sitting in that moment for like that little bit longer, and you kind of left like oh shit. So yeah, it is interesting that they decided to do it this way. I guess they wanted to get the song in, but yeah,
Which they could have over the credits technically,
yeah,
but
true.
yeah. All right, anything else you want to address?
Um, I don't think so. I guess we could talk about our best moments,
The
and that sort of stuff.
superlatives?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, what was your I don't know if there's a best moment, but yeah. I was thinking about it. I was like, I'm not sure I can call like is the most emotional moment the best moment? I don't know. But what was yours?
Yeah. I think it was, and I kind of mentioned it, and like I said, I'm still kind of conflicted of how everything's played out, but
Mm,
just the way Abby's group reacted, like that specifically, like how that play out when they reveal who Joel is. I thought that was just really well done. And I think that's a welcome change for me that I really appreciated. Just seeing them being like, "Gotta kill this guy." Oh man, I didn't want to do this.
yeah.
I just thought it was like really well handled. So I think that if it's a very small moment and quite subtle, but I just really appreciated them doing that.
Yeah, my favorite moment was when that one I kind of alluded to before when the infected from under the snow just came to life and just erupted from this field because I think that was just such a great moment of tension and
Yeah.
surprise that I wasn't expecting. So I quite enjoyed that. Um, do you have a favorite performance or line? It's
Uh
really like three pronged, I think.
Yeah, I think it's probably Abby for me. I really liked seeing a lot more of her in this episode. Even like the small moments when she's out in the snow and she's kind of like it's so cold out here and
Yeah,
things like that. I thought Caitlin Dever like just um really brought so much to this performance and this portrayal of the character. So yeah, I think Abby's my MVP. Even though like you really do she really like does a good job of making you want to hate her because like just some of her line deliveries, especially that speech she gives to Joel, is just like oh it's
it's very
brutal.
complex because there's even a moment when, Owen comes in and he's cold. She's like, "Oh, I'll get you something to warm up," and kinda like it's a
Yeah,
tender moment. I was like, "Oh, that was nice."
yeah.
But then in the next moment, it's like telling Mel to, like, shut the fuck up, basically,
Yeah,
which was
true.
so violent. I was like, "Wow, this she's a complex character," and I think the intrigue that Caitlin has built is really great because you will kind of people will I think they will dislike her after this moment, but I think there might be room to also want to know more about her, whereas that was
Yeah,
harder in the game because you spent a lot of time not knowing who she was and just hating her. So when the flip comes, you are super uncomfortable the entire time, and then some people never got past that moment. So,
yeah.
yeah, I think she did a really great job of that. Mine, I think, just has to go to Pedro just because it was
Mm,
he honestly, he didn't really have a lot to do in the episode. He died very well. And I did find it interesting. He wasn't as defiant as Joel was in the game, but he did get that moment when she's like, I've waited so long to do this. He's like, just shut up and do it already, which I was like,
yeah,
that's a Joel line. Um,
yeah.
so I'm glad he got that moment because at first I thought he was just going to sit there and take it quietly, which I didn't love for him.
Mm,
But he got that, and then I thought, okay, that's Joel. So
yeah.
Pedro, you will be missed. I know you're coming back in other episodes, but this was a hard one.
One small moment with Joel that we didn't get in the game, I don't think, is that after he gets shot, he's like kind of like, "We just saved you. Like, what is happening here?"
Yeah.
So this kind of like,
Yeah, he points
um,
that out, right?
yeah. So bringing that kind of moral kind of like, the scales of like what is right, what is wrong. I thought that was kind of an interesting addition. And I kind of like that they brought that in here.
Yeah, and there was also another moment that I think I read in an article or something where it's like, when you look at it, Abby is the reason that Jackson gets attacked because she
Mm,
sees the horses. She then falls down the hill. She then wakes up all the infected it's kind of their fault that they direct them back towards the town just by digging up the roots. But she woke up all these infected in the first place, which resulted in like heaps of people dying. So that was all the collateral damage that she'll never know about in her quest for revenge, which we'll now probably see in the news cycle. So yeah, it was thematically set up quite well. Did you have a favorite Easter egg from the game?
I think my favorite Easter egg, and I guess technically it's not in the game. I think it might be in a version of the game from what I've read. But it is the Through the Valley song, which I think is performed by Ashley Johnson.
It is, yeah.
In the episode, yeah, and yeah, because this song, if you're not familiar, was the song that Ellie sings in the E3 2016 trailer, I believe, which is just
Hmm.
like a cinematic, and like she's just singing this song. And like the feelings it evoked when they did play it, I was like, oh my god, I'm back watching that trailer again. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I thought like it was really cool that they included it here. I think like from what I can tell online, because I've never played permadeath mode, but apparently you do get a scene or something like that where they do play this in the game if you play permadeath mode. Um,
Oh yeah, and the credits, I think.
yeah, so yeah, I'm just really glad they got it in there. I thought that was like a really just a really cool Easter egg.
Yeah, that was mine too, like, just hearing her voice overlaying what's about to happen. Like I said, I didn't really feel the need for that montage, but I am glad that they used the song,
Yeah.
particularly with that being the title of the episode as well. It's very symbolic for what's about to come.
Mhm.
And let's finish things up with what we think for next week. Any predictions that you wanna make?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, from everything that has kind of happened so far, it feels like your version of the show seems to be what they're doing. So I'm also almost inclined to say like just listen to the primer and listen to that because I feel like you did a pretty good job there. Um, the thing that I'm wondering is that clearly they want to show more of Abby's group front on, um, or early on, and show a bit more of their kind of hesitancy, the more of their motivations. I wonder if we'll see more of their kind of more of the fallout of this and like what that kind of stews with between them in terms of the relationships and like how this decision like affects them directly afterwards. I don't know if we'll get
Mm,
that. Maybe there's not enough room in the episode, but that's my kind of main thing. I'm wondering whether we'll get more of that.
possibly. I think from next week or potentially the week after, we'll know whether they're actually following the game or if they are doing more of that like intermingling of the storylines. So I think we'll probably find that out pretty soon. Trailer for this has shown that, you know, the grieving Joel, that Dina can provide Ellie with the names for where they want to go. So it seems like the quest could be in action as soon as next week. I'm not sure if they'll get to Seattle by next week or not.
Mm,
Possibly. It could be next week. Maybe they, like, go on the journey and they reach Seattle by the end of the episode, potentially.
yeah,
I don't know because he wasn't in the trailer, but I'm still kind of feeling like Eugene is being explained next week. He's been very
really.
explicitly
Okay.
mentioned twice, and his death keeps being brought up, and I think it's time to explain that, otherwise we're all gonna forget about it. So I think that might be
Okay.
still might be next week, like a flashback kinda episode.
Okay. Like, so you think it might be like just to keep, I guess, to keep Pedro in the show. So I wonder if, like, yeah, will it? Do you think it'll be like a flashback of like cutting between Joel's stuff with Eugene and then like the stuff in the present day? Like, is that how you kind of imagining it?
Possibly, because
Yeah.
if you think about it, like, Gail, who's the therapist who I assume we're gonna see again,
Yeah.
and probably needs to talk to some of these people after this.
Yeah.
Like she's had this experience of grief, and potentially like her explaining her process might be what she explains to Ellie, or vice versa, and that might bring up some of those memories. Perhaps is the way into that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it. I think this would be the right place to do it, unless they end up doing just like one solid flashback heavy episode, which I still think is six.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I do question like whether we get to Seattle or if this episode or the next episode ends on the decision to like, okay, we are going to Seattle and that's kind of where we leave off. Yeah, I'm just kind of I'm not sure how far along they want to get basically. So yeah, I'm just curious where I'll how much they'll do.
Yeah, there's a lot of gameplay heavy things that come into play once you get into Seattle. Like there's less like you'd
Yeah.
probably string all the cutscenes together into like an hour. So
Yeah.
It's yeah, interesting time. I think, like I said, this episode has been um a little bit eye-opening in that it was like I'm feeling I know the story, I should know what's gonna happen, and I've often found in The Last of Us a satisfaction when I see certain things from the game come to life very faithfully, and this is the
Mhm.
first time I've really felt that they're kind of diverging from the path, like, not hugely, but in some significant ways, and so I kind of do feel like I'm on a lot of the same page as everyone else, and it's just like an unpredictable time.
Yeah, I think that's maybe why they wanted to make these changes so that I guess similar like not similarly ish to season 1 with like episode 3 and Bill and Frank, like they want to keep like players of the games on their toes. But even more so with this with like the changes that they've made. But yeah, I definitely feel similar. I feel kind of like uncertain of like how yeah, I kind of came into this like thinking that there were like going to be two ways of doing this, either like splitting up the groups and like going back and forth between Abby and Ellie, or they're going to do it like the game. This is kind of like a mix of both, and it could really just diverge into any way at this point, in terms of how they tell the story, rest of the story. So yeah, I don't know what to expect, like, which is kind of exciting, but also kind of scary. Like,
Yeah.
I kind of on the edge of my seat.
I think it's just one of those, like, things where you're gonna have to come to terms with the fact that the game will be the game. It will always
Yeah,
be there, it's not changing, and the show will be what it is, and you just have to take them as it is, and I'm kind of enjoying that feeling of like, "Oh, this was my reaction to the show," which seems to be in line with what they've built versus what my reaction was to the game. It's just it's kinda fun.
it's kind of fun. Yeah.
I love crying over things.
It's always an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, if that's all we have to say about Last of Us season 2, episode 2, yeah, let us know what you think in the comments below. If you've watched the episode, what do you think? What was your favorite moment? What was your favorite character? Easter egg predictions? Let us all know. But yeah, if that's all we have to say, I guess we should move on to what we've been playing, or more what we've been watching, because Lauren, we've both watched a movie this weekend, and I think it changed both of our lives. I think it like exceeded all our expectations. The cinematography, the performances, the story, all gripping. And then we watched the Minecraft movie, uh, because we also watched Sinners, which is a good movie. But yeah, we're a gaming podcast. We're here to talk about the Minecraft movie. Uh, and yeah, so if you don't know, if you're one of the few people who haven't seen the Minecraft movie yet, because this movie is doing amazingly well box office wise at the very least. It's a movie directed by Jared Hess, starring Jack Black, Jason Momoa, some other people, and kind of a basically it's Jumanji, but it's Minecraft. It's a group of people, and they go into a portal, and they're in Minecraft world, and they basically have to stop this evil sorceress from taking over the overworld. Uh, yeah, that's the premise of the thing. Lauren, what do you think of the movie?
Um It was fine. Like, it's probably his best it was probably the best I could have expected for the Minecraft movie. Yeah, I think I was a little bit more, not I wouldn't say interested, but the interesting thing was the cinema experience for me because I didn't realize how much the kids had been organizing themselves in Minecraft to say certain lines and cheer at certain things, and then obviously it's escalated into the point that they're destroying cinemas and bringing live chickens and making life hell for people there, which absolutely you should not do. Like, the movies should be a safe place to go and enjoy an experience together. I was like, my cinema was quite polite. They would just like clap at certain things and say certain lines and cheer, which I felt
Okay.
was quite wholesome. And I quite liked that. I was like, oh, they're really enjoying the movie, and if this is what makes them like have a good time because they get to say with their friends, "I am Steve," well, good for you. But yeah, I definitely did not feel any of that because I haven't played Minecraft, and I'm sure there were a lot of references that went over my head. But yeah, listen, did it did its thing. It was like the Super Mario Brothers movie. It was like it was just very plot thin, not much character development, some baffling choices. Really, my takeaway from it is that it like, the experience of going to Minecraft became a bit of a meme, and I just think the whole movie was trying to be a meme.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah, it's interesting because my screening of the movie was like very different from all the videos that had gone along. Like nobody said anything, and I think that's a very British thing. I think like
Okay.
there have been, there've been some movies like Infinity War or Endgame or like No Way Home where people have kind of flipped out at least a little bit. But with the Minecraft movie, at least because I mean it's 2 weeks since the movie's come out at this point, but like no one really said anything, even when even when Jack Black saying chicken jockey and all this sort of stuff. But no, as for what I thought of it, I'm coming to this like having been like I loved Minecraft like when I was I don't know like 12 and like
Yep.
from then so I was really into it when like the beta was happening and then I followed it along for a couple of years so I was very invested and then I feel like with Minecraft I come back to it in like spurts like sometimes I'll get really invested in playing Minecraft for a while and then I'll kind of back off and then that's kind of my relationship with it. I really like Minecraft as a game. Movie bad. I thought the movie was quite bad. It felt Super Mario Brothers movie is it's a very apt comparison because it felt like one of those to me where it was like
Yeah.
or like a Five Nights at Freddy's where it was like let's get all of the references in here. Let's adapt a lot of the game elements, which I wasn't expecting, to be honest, and do that aspect of it quite well. Like, there's some really deep cut references that I didn't
Hmm.
expect them to go into in this movie, which I kind of appreciated. But then, if you have all that, you're left with nothing else, and the characters and the story are just like they just meant nothing to me. That I really couldn't get invested in anything. I thought like they really tried. Jared Hess, who directed it, directed Napoleon Dynamite, and I kind of could see those elements, especially at the beginning of the movie where it's like more set in the real world. But a lot of it just doesn't like it just doesn't work. Like none of the humor really works for me at all.
Yeah.
I don't think I laughed like once. Which is a shame. And I know this is it definitely felt to me like this is a movie directed at kids, and I feel like kids will really like it. But
Yeah.
yeah, looking at it for me, like it just didn't do anything for me. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but like I feel like the Sonic movies have more heart. And like if you've listened to the show for a while, you'll
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
the Sonic movies I haven't really gelled with that as much until the third movie. Um, but yeah, I just feel like if they had taken that approach, at least with like the kind of getting invested in the characters a little bit, I think it could have worked a bit better. But yeah, they just didn't do that here.
Yeah. I feel like with Sonic works because you are invested in the actual game characters, like they gave them personality and story arcs and stuff. Whereas Minecraft, you're the player, like it's sandbox. You can't like you're interacting with things like creepers and sheep and villagers and stuff who literally say nothing, and they don't say anything in the game either, in the movie either.
Yeah,
So I think it was really hard to like build any kind of characterization with them. They purely had to rely on the human characters who are just not that interesting. I do not
yeah,
care that Jason Momoa was a world famous gamer back in like whatever, and that he's trying to recapture his glory, and that he kind of just wants to impress this young boy. I had no idea who the lead of the movie was supposed to be. Was it the young kid?
yeah.
Was it Jason Momoa? Was it Jack Black? The female characters, like God forbid they have anything to do. Like
No,
literally, I don't know why they were there.
yeah,
And yeah, it just I think that was their downfall, was just that Minecraft is like a really interesting world and fun for the player to experience, but not necessarily fun for the people to witness.
yeah. That's the thing, and I think like they just yeah they do like you said they didn't give them anything to do. I think they with the kind of kid characters they kind of try to do this thing where there's this backstory of like their mothers like passed away or the parents like something's happened to them. Um, but it's not
Which
like
is never
full.
explained.
Yeah, they just don't follow up with that at all. Like that could have maybe fueled a bit of a more of an emotional core to it, but like they don't do anything with that at all. I heard on another podcast, the Weekly Planet that I listen to a lot, they were kind of talking about the movie and like they kind of pointed out that one way they could have structured it instead is like this kid is kind of positioned as like he's really creative and he's like wants to do all these things. But then you also have Jack Black in the Minecraft world, and he's also very creative and like he's doing all these things. It maybe would have been a bit more interesting if like maybe like Steve had like the skills but none of like the creativity to kind of make these ideas come to fruition. That's kind of what the kid brings to this, and there's kind of more of an arc there. But there was just nothing. Like it was just kind of like, oh, he made like a tater tot gun. That's cool, I guess. But they
Yeah.
just don't do anything further with any of that.
Yeah, there was this weird bromance building between, like, Garrett and Steve that I was a bit like, "What's going on here?" Like, I'll never get over the scene when when they're flying and they're basically 69, like, what the
This
hell?
the 69 scene is crazy. If you've
Oh,
not seen the
I
movie, by the
can't
way, that out of context that sounds crazy, but like
but
watch the movie, you understand. But
it's more accurate than you think. Like, I
it
was like,
really is.
"Do we know what we're
Yeah.
alluding to here, right?"
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and Jennifer Coolidge? What are you doing here, mate?
That was wild to me because I thought when they set that up, I thought like, okay, this could be like a fun thing, but they barely do that. They barely do anything with that like kind of scenario at all.
There's no
And they don't
reason
do
for
it
it to be
well.
there. There's
No.
just 0 reason. She has this weird little romance with a villager who gets transported to the real world and is the man of her dreams because, hey, he doesn't say anything, which is a
Yeah.
little funny, I'm not gonna lie. But I just like, she had no investment in the wider storyline, so every time it cut to her, I was just like, "You've just dropped any momentum that you had." Because
Yeah.
these sequences are just not funny. I'm sorry.
No.
They're funny because of how silly they are.
Yeah. You're laughing at them, not with them,
Yes.
essentially. I will say for the movie, I actually thought the visuals look a lot better than I thought they were gonna look. I don't know if you felt the
Yeah.
same. But I think like the actual designs and like the things that they do with the world, I thought actually looked good. Sometimes the integration of the human characters into it doesn't look as great, but like on its own, I thought like some of the designs look really cool. I think like the creeper, like as an example, I thought that the design for the creeper is really cool because he's got like a instead of like him actually having eyes and mouth, it's like a hollow face, and then when it explodes, it kind of lights up and like emanates light from the creeper holes, I guess. But I just thought they did like a really good job of like fleshing that aspect out of it. So that was mostly what I was doing. I was like, oh, that's a cool like this character or enemy. Seeing that adapted, I thought they did a really good job with that.
I
Yeah.
mean, you would have got more references than I would. I was in this position like somebody who I needed to be in The Last of Us, where I have no context or anything. So as just an outside viewer, I was like, again, the story did the bare minimum. I was taken on a journey, I suppose. It was very silly and not engaging. And there was a bunch of box ticking. It sounded like from the applause around me at every reference. So I'm like, okay, I guess you've done an adaptation of the game. But
Yeah.
was it a good adaptation? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, I was watching it, I was like, oh, they're playing the music from the game. Like, and I loved the music from Minecraft. Like, C418, who composed it, like, did an amazing job, and I'm glad they included it in the movie. But it's not enough to make me like the movie as a whole. So yeah, if you had to give it a rating out of 5, as we do on the show, what would you give it?
Well, on Letterboxd, I gave it 2 out of 5 because I think it was passable. It was better
Yeah.
than Borderlands.
It was better than Borderlands. I gave it the same. I gave it a 2 out of
Okay.
5. Uh, it was just like yeah, it was a like if you're old enough and listening to this, go watch Sinners. I think like
Yeah.
that's the takeaway. Watch that movie because that's a
Yeah,
much better
it's a
movie
movie for
than the Minecraft
children.
movie.
Minecraft is a movie for children, same as Super Mario Brothers, so I didn't expect to be, like, blown
Yeah,
away by it. But then also, you can sometimes hope that, like, it'll be like a Pixar movie where it treats both audiences at the same level, there's something for
that's the
everyone.
hope. Yeah, exactly.
Hasn't happened yet.
No. Uh, but yeah, that's the Minecraft movie. Have you playing anything else this past week, or has it just been that?
Last of Us, as I said, just replaying the
Yep.
parts of the show that are coming up, replaying parts of the game that are coming up with the show. Also, I'm playing in upgraded style now because this bad boy arrived this week.
Ooh, Oh my
Yeah, I
god,
actually
that's
haven't opened it. Should I
awesome.
do an
Oh,
unboxing?
live unboxing. Let's do it.
Wow, unboxing for the crowd. I was actually conflicted on buying this because personally, I thought they could have done so much more with The Last of Us PS5, like DualSense controller. Wow, it's stuck, so this is not happening today, is it?
This is we're
Anyway,
doing live.
here's what
We're
it
doing
looks
live.
like.
Yeah, if you
I should have
can't
prepared ahead of time.
yeah, it's fine. If you're listening to the audio version, basically Lauren has a DualSense controller based on The Last of Us, and it's pretty cool. It wants to stay in the box clearly, but it's cool that you have it.
Next week, I'll actually bring it out of the box.
Yeah, but if you want to see at least the box, go to the YouTube version and you can see it there.
Yeah, I promise it's in there.
Yeah, but anything else, or is that it?
That's it for me right now. What about you?
Yeah, I had to fulfill my promise of finishing Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown because I didn't finish it for New Game Plus last month, which I felt bad about. So I'm still chipping my way through that. I got stuck at one point, so I was like I'm getting a bit frustrated, but I think I'm on the home stretch now. I'm soon to see the end of this game, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm also playing through Until Dawn a little bit because the movie's coming out next
Okay,
week at the time of recording. Um, I've heard the movie's good. I don't know if
that's
it
good.
adapts any of the game elements,
Right.
but going back to the game, I'm really enjoying it again. Even though it's very jump scare heavy at the beginning, and not in
Oh,
like a great way because it's a lot of like fake out scares. But these characters, even though a lot of them are very terrible at the beginning of the game, to be honest, but I can't wait to get further into it where you kind of see the more redeeming qualities of them. But yeah,
okay.
uh, that's
Yeah,
what.
I would have liked to have played Until Dawn before the movie, but now I think I'll take that approach of like I'll just go in blind and see if I can understand the movie as a non-game player.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you think of it. Like, and whether that you get some enjoyment out of it. But yeah, we'll maybe we'll talk about that next week. But yeah, that's what we've been playing. We don't have a comment corner this week, but like I said, if you have any thoughts about The Last of Us, let us know in the comments on Spotify, on YouTube. Our question for this week is absolutely, what do you think of The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2? Let us know your theories, thoughts, everything down below in the comments. We do not have a New Game Plus for this month, I don't believe,
We're
which is
taking a
our
break.
yeah, we're taking a break because that's our monthly video game book club. Essentially, where we play a game every month. This month is just very heavy, Last of Us heavy, so we decided to take a little bit of a break. But I'm sure we'll be back on it soon because there are some games we need to get to at some point. Um, but I think that'll do. I think that's the show. And if you want to follow us, it's at Controller Club Pod on Instagram and Blue Sky, at Controller underscore Club on Twitter, and at Controller.club on TikTok. You can also watch a video version of the podcast if you're not already on our YouTube channel, which is at Controller underscore Club on YouTube. Watch the latest episodes, best segments, clips from the past. It's a lot of fun over there, so go check it out. Please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. 5 stars is always appreciated, helps out the show a lot. Give us a like as well, comment, like we said. Send in any questions, topic ideas, or just simple hellos as well to controllerclubpod@gmail.com. Lauren, where can the people find you?
You can follow me at lrouse19, mainly on Blue Sky. This week, I said I would do it last week and then I didn't. But this week, I will put up some comparison shots from the Last of Us game and show, which I've been taking as I play along. Some of them are like we talked about some changes they made today, but some of them are just bang on exactly the same from the game. So it's great to see that they're still doing that. And so I'll post some of my favorites. Although some of them might be a little graphic, so be warned.
Yeah, some of it gets a little bit brutal, but yeah, I can't wait to see those comparisons when they go up. As for me, you can follow me at Tom Drew Art, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, basically everywhere. I've been posting a couple of sketches, draft, doodle things, some Pokemon characters, some Marvel Rivals characters. Just getting back into drawing, so hopefully I'll have some finished stuff soon. I don't know when that'll be, but if you want to find that, Tom Drew Art on those places. And you also follow Klein, who's unfortunately not here today, at the Kleinfeld everywhere, like we said. But there, that wraps it up for this episode of Controller Club. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get gaming.